What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018, getting on toward the end of the month here, getting toward Memorial Day and the official start of summer here. We have got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. So let's get on into it, starting with the war zone over in Syria. Apparently, a drone of supposedly unknown origin tried to attack the Russian airbase at Khmeimim. Apparently there were multiple drones, and they were all shot out of the sky by Russian air defenses. And the Russian Defense Ministry is out there saying that an unmanned aircraft of unknown origin has been shot down near the airbase in Syria. No one was injured in the incident, and the base did not sustain any damage. Well, Russia is apparently presuming the drone is coming from the rebels, because the Russian military basically uncorked over the Idlib governorate, targeting several areas controlled by the jihadi rebels in the western part of the province. And the airstrikes, cruise missiles, they really unloaded. And the Russian military began their attack by launching several airstrikes over Idlib city, Idlib central prison, Al-Mastoma, Ariha, and Sheikh Ali. And following the airstrikes, the source stated the Russian Navy fired a number of cruise missiles towards the same areas. So basically they're saying this was retaliation for the drone attack, and quite a strong one. And whoever was behind the drone, if we assume it was the jihadi rebels, they may think twice before trying that one again. If, on the other hand, it was an Israeli drone, it's not like they're going to care what the aftermath was here. As of right now, the Syrian army has full control of metropolitan Damascus after ISIS finally pulled on out. So Damascus is secured. Daraa is next. Assad has won this war. He's really won this war. And the U.S. is looking basically at their first military defeat since Vietnam. That's what's going on here. And the U.S. is trying to figure out a way to either turn the tide and get back in and just go after Assad, or a graceful way to exit Syria without it looking like the defeat that it actually is. But the U.S. was in Syria for, 7 going on 8 years, trying to change the government, and they failed. This is a military defeat. And the result is that the wheels could come off the war wagon entirely because of this. So we're seeing these unmanned aerial vehicle attacks, little skirmish kind of things going on, nothing major right now. Mike Pompeo, in his first major speech as U.S. Secretary of State, Pompeo threatened Iran with the strongest sanctions in history unless they withdraw their forces from Syria and end support for Hezbollah and Hamas. So he's out there talking tough. He's trying to get Iran out of Syria. Iran responded by saying it is the illegal foreign troops that must leave Syria, the troops that are not there with the permission of the Syrian government. And apparently the Syrian army is now starting to round up some of these foreign troops to kick them out of the country. And they've apparently detained 300 of the French military. And they're going to say au revoir and bon voyage and send them on back to France. But the Syrian government does want these illegal foreign troops out, and that, of course, obviously includes the United States of America. Now, there's been yet another discovery of NATO weapons that's been found in a vast stock of NATO weapons by the Syrian military. And some of the gear was meant for protection against chemical weapons. So the assumption here is that Yes, somebody somewhere is preparing for another false flag chemical weapon attack with which to justify a renewed aggression against Syria. We're going to take a phone call here from Raleigh in Minnesota. Aloha, Raleigh. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, there's a cultural development that's really been bothering me lately, and it's this idea of wondering which way somebody voted after a massacre. You know, identity politics in America is really toxic. I'm talking about like nuclear waste sort of toxic. And this guy, Demetrius Papadopoulos, who was not old enough to vote, there's these memes out there of him wearing a Hillary Clinton 2016 hat, and it's absolutely outstanding that's the first thing that people come up with was what's their political identity after a mass shooting, you know, with these school shootings. And there's been reports saying that this guy was a neo-Nazi because there was an iron cross on his trench coat, but he had a lot of symbols on his trench coat. He put a Twitter post of his trench coat, and it had the iron cross on his left breast pocket.
Yes.
And he also had the hammer and the sickle on the collar. And he had the Cthulhu, you know, from H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
And he had a pentagram as well. So people are saying, you know, he was an LGB lefty pinko, and other people are saying that he's a Nazi right winger, you know, on Twitter, and it's just so counterproductive. You know, like there's really no place for that, you know, and people are so worried and so entrenched and so tribal, schoolyard bully mentality that we don't even think of each other as being Americans ourselves.
No, you're absolutely right. It's just more divisiveness. This kid was wearing those pins because he thought they were cool. They're mildly offensive to people. He was probably trolling for some reactions. I remember when I was a kid and these things weren't actually being banned, a lot of kids would wear the Nazi regalia that was brought home by their relatives from World War II. And it wasn't really that big a deal. It didn't make us Nazis. We were just out there saying, you know, hey, we've got a relic. But right now, everybody is gearing up for the midterm elections, and they're using anything they can grab onto to try and score political points. Our nation has become so totally dominated by the political process that we can't get anything else done. And that includes the political correctness issue. Now it's turning out, though, apparently this kid may not have been responsible for all the deaths in that school. The police are admitting that some of the students and teachers may have actually been shot by police officers in the crossfire. Apparently, the officers weren't checking their targets before they pulled the trigger. So they're waiting for the autopsy reports on that. They're looking through the school security cameras to build up a timeline. But they're now saying that some of the victims may have actually accidentally been killed by the police.
Absolutely amazing that happened. So, like the 10 deaths, he might not even be responsible for all of those. But he did put out a tweet posting, like you just said, giving a definition for each individual symbol. And he said the hammer is sickle as part of his rebellion, and the rising sun is kamikaze tactics, and Iron Cross is bravery, and Baphomet, the goat head symbol of Luciferianism, was for evil, and Cthulhu was for power as well. And, you know, all those clash. And, you know, with a kid that has teenage angst, you don't necessarily have that sort of political, you know, stability to know distinguish the difference between the two or even care, really.
You know, you're absolutely right. It's just something to be rebellious, to shock the parents, to try and stake out his own identity. But again, I want to find out if this kid was on prescription psychiatric medication, because he was clearly showing signs of depression.
Definitely, and he had a lot of pins on him, you know, and that definitely may have been a cry for help or to establish some sort of identity. He also liked to wear the symbol for bisexual pride, which is the heart. and he flipped it upside down. And he also had Born to Kill T-shirt, and he would wear the peace sign, which reminded me a lot of Full Metal Jacket.
Yes.
The Joker character, where he was competing between these two ideologies of growing up during the flower power era, and he's born to kill, drafted, ready, lean, mean, killing machine, Marine, and battling those two because he, the kid, Demetrius, did some sort of river dancing, like cultural dancing, for Greek, people.
Yes.
As well. So he was involved with a lot of like artsy things as well. He wasn't all into ammo and guns and survival and stuff like that, But
no, early on
he'd
been an honor student. He was on the junior varsity football team, and then all of a sudden he goes downhill. Again, to me, that suggests the pattern following the doctor prescribing him antidepressants. They love to hand those things out. The one experience I had with antidepressants, and it was a very bad one, I didn't ask for them. I didn't even say I was depressed. I was at the doctor's for a totally unrelated medical issue. And the doctor just said, how are you doing? Because I was in the process of breaking up with my first wife. And I said, well, can't remain entirely cheerful. And she said, well, here, let me give you a prescription for blah, 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 blah. I can't remember which one it was she gave me. And I had a very negative reaction to that. And I will never, ever take those medications again.
Now that you mention it, Mike, I'm pulling up a photo of him, and he does look calm as a Hindu cow. He has this look of like serenity.
That's a good phrase. I like that.
He has like red eyes a little bit, and he has like this little smirk on his face, and he does have acne on his face. That's another sign. And he looks like he could be on Xanax or something along the lines. I haven't really studied that, but I'm just judging by these pictures that he has of him. I think you're right with that. He could be on psychotropic medicines.
Yeah, again, it's an open issue, and it's a reasonable question given all the evidence about the link between these medications and acts of otherwise insane violence.
Absolutely correct. And they're probably going to come up with some sort of solutions for this. We got to get rid of the big pharmaceutical companies. That's killing our children. If you can't deal with a child, you don't need to be raising a child. Where do we get this idea as a society to give our kids pills just to calm them down? I got 5 children myself, and I'm 33 years old, and I just hear them out, listen to them, play with them. If you take them out in the woods and play with them for a little while, that solves a lot of problems, especially like with behavior. If they're showing some sort of sign of psychopathy or something along the lines of that, just giving them attention and playing with them and taking them outdoors and teaching them life skills. That way they don't feel depressed and ever need to take medicines.
Well, looking at the history of the kid from the Texas school incident, his parents obviously were doing a good job. He had been an honor student and was on the junior varsity football team. That sounds to me like they're raising a good child. They may have been talked into these medications by their physician, who may be getting a kickback from the pharmaceutical company. And the medications may have just put this kid into a bad place, and they would have prescribed more medication. It can become a real cycle. Some years ago, when I was researching my article on the link between these drugs and violence, I read this tragic story about a young lady in Great Britain who was perfectly normal, perfectly happy, fully functional, had a job, had a life, and the doctor just said, let's try this, it's going to make you feel better. And she had a negative reaction, and the doctor's response was, well, we'll try this other medication, and then we'll try this other medication. Not once was the idea of pulling her off these medications proposed, and they literally drugged her into a mental breakdown, and she wound up in a mental hospital. To me, that shows the utter callousness with which the medical industrial complex is treating ordinary people.
And the type of kickbacks you're talking about all expensive paid trips to advertise some sort of medication, by the big pharma. and that includes like your wife and kids. So they're down in Florida, talking about a product, and they definitely have a different mindset than most of us. They're worried about the Ferrari payment. I'm worried about my car breaking down when I drive. It's a different mindset, between these physicians and us. Doesn't the general attorney actually wear a military uniform himself?
No, I don't believe a military uniform is required because a civilian can take the position. The term general is not a military one in that context, like Surgeon General, Attorney General, and so forth. Anyway, Raleigh, we're going to let you go. I got to get back to the news here. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network now. We're talking about the war zones. And getting on back to Bloody Monday Massacre, the outrage is still being expressed around the world. And there's an interesting article that came out of Global Research up in Canada. They do really good work. They're a reliable resource. And basically, they're reporting that the authorization for the IDF snipers to kill Palestinian children came down from the very top of the Israeli government. The Israeli government came up with the rules of engagement, and the rules of engagement were it's okay to kill kids, including that 8-month-old baby. Now, a Palestinian diplomat has called on Arab nations to cut ties with any country that move their embassies in Israel to Jerusalem. So the tensions are building up over that. All right, another phone call here. Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike, I hope you're having a great and wonderful day, and I hope players too. I wanted to touch on you were talking about mental health, and I wanted to give you a personal story and as well as some other things too. I've told you before, I'm losing my eyesight. I have, retinitis pigmentosa. Of course, if anybody's losing their eyesight, they're going to be depressed. I would hope somebody, that's a natural response. But they put me on some type of serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and I would lose, I tried it for a couple weeks, and I would lose all consciousness. I would fall asleep and wake up not knowing what I was doing. I would be drool coming out of my mouth because I was so inebriated from this medication. It was horrible, and I felt horrible. I was edgy, and no matter what pill that they gave me, it was worse. Oh, well, let's try this. Well, we're going to try that. Like you said a minute ago. Every time, well, this medication doesn't work, it's, I'm a zombie. Well, let's try this. I mean, my question is, do these doctors get kickbacks for putting you on these medications, or is it, well, let's try to find, quote unquote, a magical bullet to help you?
No, the pharmaceutical industries reimburse doctors, or they offer incentives to doctors to sell more of their medications. And some of them are just flat out direct payments. Others are invitations to attend medical conferences, all expenses paid. It can be a real racket. And we had a story, I think, last week where this one doctor was finally arrested and charged for telling patients they had cancer or rather arthritis when they did not, in order to prescribe and sell them medications for which he was getting a kickback from the pharmaceutical companies. It's a racket. Healthcare in this country is no longer about healthcare. It's been turned into another racket like everything else.
I agree. And then you were, I wanted to add a comment on this embassy move with Israel, and I know you called it Bloody Monday, and I agree with you. My two questions about the embassy move. A, what purpose did this serve? What is, what's the purpose? And B, why now? Are my two questions.
Well, Israel has been lobbying the United States for decades to move their embassy to Jerusalem to sort of symbolically cement Israel's ownership over Jerusalem, even though the United Nations has declared Jerusalem a international city that must be shared among the 4 major religions whose holy sites are there. But Israel has always coveted Jerusalem any way they can get it, and they wanted the U.S. Embassy there. Okay, we got to take a break. Stay on the line, Kevin. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to Kevin here, just a quick reminder, Republic Broadcasting needs your help. For some reason, all the people with big money are supporting the liars in order to get more of your money. And as a result, we who are out here trying to get the truth out to you, well, we need your help. We need the little money to unite together in opposition to the big money. So if you can help Republic Broadcasting, even just a little tiny bit, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas. And the phone number, and this is actually changed here, is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, and after business hours, it's extension 3. So please help out. Now, Kevin, we were talking about the move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Israel has been wanting this for a very, very long time. Past presidents have always rejected the idea, knowing it was going to complicate the geopolitical situation across the entire Mideast. But Trump, under pressure apparently from Sheldon Adelson, his biggest donor, went ahead and did it, and choosing to do it on the day of the Nakba. Well, they wanted it to coincide with the celebration, 70th celebration of Israel's independence or creation, which is also the Nakba Day. Yeah, that only inflamed the situation a little bit more. Plus, you have Israel's rocket attacks into Gaza and the sniper shootings during the March for Land. It almost seems like Netanyahu wants a new intifada, possibly to distract the Israeli people away from his pending corruption charges.
I was thinking was, he was trying to have a diversion away from his corruption charges. The other thing that I was thinking, too, like, what did this accomplish? Besides getting a bunch of Palestinians killed, what exactly did this accomplish? As far as I'm concerned,
it didn't accomplish anything. Basically, they took the existing consulate in Jerusalem and said, you are now the embassy, and they've added on some more construction to it. But it didn't really change functionality at all. It's purely symbolic.
Cool. Well, you have a great and wonderful show, and please give Miss Claire the best, and we will be listening.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Richard in North Carolina. Aloha, Richard. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Great, okay. An issue that has come up in other calls you've had. By the way, I'm an old, my undergraduate work was at Kent State back in 1970, that period, so I know I began to learn a little bit about what was really going on back then when I knew that they were ordered to fire on the other students. But anyway, I ended up graduating from Kent and several other universities, and I ended up being a forensic neuropsychologist, which is what I'm now retired from being. But I wanted to comment because it had come up a little while ago, I think, or at least something akin to it, that I wanted to comment about social services for children, children's protective services and so forth that occur in a town near mine. I'm not going to say where that is, although I am in North Carolina, but that they always found a reason, because I worked closely with the children of these families and the families themselves in many cases, and they would meet all the requirements. They would do all the things they needed to do, but they would still find, social services would still find another reason to keep them in the system, which finally I realized was a racket. And it was rather disappointing, but I thought I'd call and share that with you.
Yeah, there's been a big problem. I'm sure that there are people working in these various child protective services organizations who really are concerned about cruelty to children, which is a reality out there. But the hard fact is, the more children they take in, the more money they get. And after a while, as you say, it descends into being a racket. And especially during the 1990s, at the height of the militant feminist male bash situation. I literally went to a talk being given by this lady from CPS in Los Angeles, and up on the stage, she came on out and said, all men will abuse their children. It's my job to say when. And that kind of an arrogant attitude reveals a lot of what's wrong, where CPS was being weaponized by the feminists to destroy families and to go after men. Down in San Diego, their Child Protective Services was sued so many times for constitutional violations. The city finally just shut the whole department down, fired everybody, and restarted from scratch. So like anything else, it can be used for good purposes or it can be turned to bad purposes. It all depends on who's in charge. But that economic incentive to grab more children is a big part of the problem.
It really is. It's a great part of the problem. But I'll get off the horn here. And next time I'm going to try to call more regularly now if I can. But I'll try to go over to other sorts of topics, the other kind that you talk about.
All right. Well, thanks
so
an awful lot, Richard. We're going to let you go. We're going to take another commercial break, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Getting on back to the news here. People are looking at Mike Pompeo's speech, getting tough on Iran, and analysts are basically saying that it was unreasonable and brutal, and we know that Iran is not going to agree to all the demands that were made, in particular getting out of Syria, because Iran is in Syria with the permission of the Syrian government, unlike the United States of America. So again, this is starting to reinforce the world's impression that the U.S. government has become a global bully, or organized crime, the mafia. Do what we tell you or bad things will happen to you. Which, if you look at our manufacturing, our agriculture, and our economy in general, it's really all they have left to play with anyway. So the U.S. is out there threatening Iran, saying, we will confront Iran. We're going to get tough on Iran. Forgetting the fact that Iran hasn't actually done anything. Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in 200 years. Yes, Iran is helping Syria. Syria asked for Iran's help. But that's it. The reason the U.S. is after Iran is, first of all, because Israel wants it. They want Iran smashed as a regional political rival. The U.S. wants Iran's oil to be sold for the U.S. dollar rather than other currencies. And the private central bankers want Iran to be enslaved to a private central bank. That's what's going on here. Iran hasn't done anything to us. Nothing at all. The U.S. is the aggressor. That's very obvious at this. Now, the Pentagon is out there also talking tough about, confronting Iran, because that will mean more money for them. The more wars there are, the more money the Pentagon gets, the faster the promotions come to the officers. Again, it's a racket, and that's not my opinion. Marine Corps Major Smedley Butler, a Major General Smedley Butler, wrote a treatise, War is a Racket. And if you have not read it, you need to hunt it down and read it. Because this was a guy who'd been there. He worked his way up the ranks to become one of the most respected Marine commanders in U.S. history. And always obeyed his orders, did what he was told. And after he retired, he looked back on his career with a great deal of honesty and objectivity and wrote down what the wars that he fought in were really all about. And it was always about corporate greed, access to natural resources, money, in other words. Over in North Korea, now we're hearing from Donald Trump that he may delay or cancel the meeting with Kim Jong-un. And they're trying to put the onus on Kim Jong-un. Mike Pence is out there saying that Trump is still considering canceling the scheduled summit, and that the talks might be off the table because Trump feels he's being played by Kim Jong-un. So the war hawks have gotten what they want. We're back to square one as far as Korea is concerned, and we may be looking at a war on North Korea. Now in South Korea, they see John Bolton as a major obstacle to peace. They see him as an obstacle to the potential Trump-Kim summit. And basically, Bolton's talk of the Libya model in North Korea provoked a lot of fury from the North Korean government. And it's understandable. The Libyan model was simple. Libya was convinced to give up their very early stage nuclear program on the promise they'd be left alone. And then the U.S. went on in and fronted what was made to look like a popular uprising to kill Gaddafi, put Libya under puppet rule, and most importantly, to end the gold dinar, which was a threat to the U.S. Federal Reserve note. Right now, the U.S. government is fighting their own history in their foreign policy. They're out there making the same promises they've made and broken many times before. And these other countries all know it. These other countries all know it. Now, the foreign media is starting to arrive in North Korea to cover the dismantling of the country's nuclear test site later this week. Apparently, the South Korean media is scheduled to participate, has not arrived yet. Now, obviously, they're going to have to close the nuke site anyway. This is a no loss for Kim Jong-un. Their last nuclear test shattered the mountain. And it's really not safe to do nuclear testing there anymore. And I hope those reporters have got radiation meters with them, just in case. But they're going to go through the formal exercise of dynamiting all the tunnels and tearing down the buildings and say it is now formally closed. So at least Kim Jong-un is moving forward with the gestures toward peace and denuclearization. But again, unless he's got some kind of an ace up his sleeve, he's being an idiot to trust anything the U.S. government says. Down in South America, Nicolas Maduro has been reelected president of Venezuela, and he won by a 2/3 majority, larger than the polls had predicted. The voter turnout, though, was a little less than expected, less than 50%, so it's hard to say that he has a mandate. But there's absolutely no question Maduro is the democratically elected president of Venezuela, and the U.S. is going to have to deal with that. But we are hearing all this talk about restoring democracy to Venezuela. We talked about that yesterday, which is code word for overthrow the government, put in a puppet ruler. Now, addressing a late Sunday night crowd of supporters, Maduro hailed his victory as a victory over imperialism and saying that Venezuela still enjoys the revolutionary spirit and that the revolution is there to stay. Now, when he's talking about imperialism, you know who he's referring to, because the United States has a long history of interference in South America. One of the best known, obviously, being Chile. Now, Maduro has celebrated his new victory by promptly ejecting the top U.S. diplomat in Caracas for allegedly conspiring against the government. He's been declared persona non grata, and he was told to leave in 48 hours. So apparently the U.S. is already trying to find a way to destabilize the government down there. You would think after the mess that they've created in Ukraine, the U.S. government might tone down this behavior, but apparently not. Apparently not. The U.S. Army is now turning to robot soldiers. Now, they've already started bringing in robots to augment the troops. A lot of the stuff that Boston Dynamics has been building are intended for battlefield use, mostly to carry gear and equipment for the soldiers themselves, because a typical loadout for a U.S. infantry soldier runs about 50 pounds. and they try and make everything as light as possible, but it is 50 pounds with a full kit. And by having a robot that is able to carry some of that, it actually increases the range and speed that your force can move. But apparently over the next few years, the Pentagon is going to spend about $1 billion for new robots to engage in scouting, explosives disposal, sniffing out hazardous chemicals, and perform complex reconnaissance. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army Surgeon General is saying that all soldiers will be microchipped for full-time monitoring and information culling. And we've been seeing that in science fiction movies like Jurassic World, where the animal containment team, as they're being chewed up, their little heartline monitor goes flat. That's going to be a reality now. So let's talk a little bit about the domestic politics. Trump is really pushing on the Justice Department to investigate the FBI's Russia probe. And looking at the revelations that have come on out, first of all, the Christopher Steele dossier, which was just apparently just made up out of thin air, contained a lot of very salacious details, a lot of sizzle that whoever made it hoped was going to catapult it into the corporate media. But even the corporate media suspected that this was bogus, and it stayed off the radar until BuzzFeed ran it. Now we're finding out the FBI had at least one mole inside the campaign. And so we're seeing these investigations of the investigations. Now the liberals are out there screaming, Trump can't investigate the investigators while he's under investigation. That's impeachable. No, it isn't. We are clearly seeing signs of malfeasance by these top officials in the Department of Justice and the FBI, especially James Comey and John Brennan. And investigations are completely warranted. Apparently, Trump's top trade advisor, Peter Navarro, was the one who recommended Stephen Halper, the spy, to a senior role in the Trump administration. Trump is surrounded by people who are not thinking in Trump's best interest. And apparently Halper visited the Eisenhower Executive Office building last August for a meeting about China. And during the transition, everyone involved in Trump's campaign was asked to submit resumes for administration positions. Halper, who already knew Navarro in the context of being a China scholar and interviewing for his anti-China book and film, pitched himself for an ambassadorship to Asia, according to sources briefed on the interactions. Navarro says he submitted Halper's name for the ambassadorship. We've not been able to confirm the country, along with about a dozen other people for roles in the region. So Navarro is the one who brought it on in, who brought the spy in. Now, former Trump campaign advisor Michael Caputo was on Fox News Monday night, pardon me, and is saying he was approached by a second government informant during his stint on the team. And Caputo was on the Ingraham angle, and he said, let me tell you something I know for a fact. This informant, this person who they tried to plant in the campaign, he's not the only person who came into the campaign, and the FBI is not the only Obama agency who came into the campaign. I know because they came at me. And I'm looking for clearance from my attorney to reveal this to the public. This is just the beginning. Now, pardon all the interruptions. I'm still a little bit under the weather here. Why this is important is because this is the penultimate in political skullduggery. And along the way, it's been revealed, this goes on all the time. We know that this Halper, during the Reagan years, ran a spy operation or was part of a spy operation against Jimmy Carter. And we know that Richard Nixon, during that whole Watergate affair, was using the FBI to spy on Democratic candidates, and then later on the media, on the Washington Post, that was trying to cover the story. But it is, in fact, illegal to do. And it's not the way the country is supposed to be run. Congressional representatives have announced they are introducing a resolution detailing misconduct at the highest level of the Department of Justice and the FBI and calling for a second special conference. Now, Obama's former Attorney General Eric Holder is out there saying there's no basis for Trump to investigate FBI election meddling. I mean, there's nothing to see here. The Russians meddle in our elections, but it's silly to think that the FBI or the CIA would. I mean, come on, it's just a waste of time out there. A lot of people in the government are starting to really sweat here. And I'm sure that John Brennan is just freaking out over Trump's demand over this investigation, over this political spying. Because the more that comes on out about the anti-Trump team, as it were, the more and more John Brennan is front and center in all of this. It appears he was the ringleader, or in this context, the ringmaster of the circus that was going on. And we're literally seeing the government at war with itself, because Trump is now pushing for investigations, the one thing Hillary could be counted on not to do had she won. And there's going to be pressure coming back from the Clinton-Obama machine to protect Hillary Clinton and Obama at all possible costs. So Trump, if you or one of your assets are listening to this program, you make sure you're wearing your Kevlar undies, because this is getting very serious and very, very real. And we know that this government is capable of assassinating the chief executive. New emails are showing that the FBI brass did discuss the dossier briefing details with CNN. Now, at the time, this dossier was supposed to be held private. But Washington, D.C. leaks like a colander. It was just all going on out there. And apparently Andrew McCabe was aware of CNN's internal understanding of a secret briefing about the Steele dossier. So the briefing itself was classified, but CNN was told. That's another Title 18 violation right there. Huma Abedin and her laptop and emails are back in the news again. And ever since Hillary Clinton lost the election, she's repeatedly blamed her defeat on the FBI's decision to reopen the probe into her email use after emails were found on the laptop of Huma Abedin's estranged husband, Anthony Weiner. And now the emails are back in the news, causing problems for FBI leaders because this forthcoming Inspector General report is going to fault Bureau officials for sitting on those emails in the first place. Now, Huma Abedin is out there enjoying the good life. She's going to all these glitzy things. Meanwhile, her soon-to-be ex-husband, Anthony Weiner, is in jail, serving a sentence for sending lewd photos to a teenager, which is really sick behavior. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to the show. Let's take some phone calls, and we're going to start with Jerry in West Michigan. Aloha, Jerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
The fellow that was on a while back there about asking about whether doctors receive the kickback or money from a pharmaceutical company, there's a real good website available to find out. Anyone can find out, most anyone can find out if their doctor or any doctor that they can come up with a name has received any kickbacks, and it's just a simple dollars for docs, DOCS, and you can pull up your personal doctor in most cases, or any other doctor that you know their name. I just thought I'd let you know that in case it would be of interest.
It would be, pardon me, of interest. I just pulled the page up, and I'm seeing the title, and it's at GoDaddy, but I'm not seeing anything else, so I think the web page happens to be broken. I know there are a couple of web pages that do this because I had a serious illness some years ago, and they kept me in the hospital, I thought, too long. And then come to find out, the doctor who'd been treating me was on one of these lists as getting all kinds of goodies from the pharmaceutical companies and so forth. So again, it's a racket. So I'd like to link to this page, but apparently at the moment it is not working. So we'll have to.
I have a start page is my page that I go to first before I can, pull up anything. It always pulls it up for me. So maybe a little more effort, and you could locate it.
Well, I found it. dollarsfordocs.com. It's titled. It's a GoDaddy page. The page is there. It's just not working right now.
Yeah, mine's not a GoDaddy, but anyway, I just thought I'd mention it. I can still pull mine up, so hopefully it helps out.
All right. Well, let me just try and see if I can find it with a web search. Thank you very much, Jerry. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I just wanted to get back to the investigations and the improprieties that have gone on against Trump, and the spy put in as far back as 2016. Or 2015 even. We've got multiple agencies from DOJ, different levels, the top levels, FBI, NSA, Clapper, CIA, Brennan, National Security Council, Rice, what's her name doing the unmasking, Samantha Powers, at the UN.
Okay, Peter, I'm going to have to put you on hold. I got to put you on hold. We got to do a station identification. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. And before we go back to Peter, I want to remind everybody that the Frontside Academy promotion has been extended until June 2nd. So you still have a chance to take advantage of this offer. Of course, June 2nd is coming up very, very quickly. So if you're going to do it, you need to do it now. Again, even if you don't want the Academy for yourself, this makes a wonderful birthday gift for somebody in your family who's a shooting enthusiast. You could get maybe several relatives together to pool the money to come up with the $500 donation to RBN and get that lifetime Commander's membership for somebody who's a real Second Amendment fan. All right, getting on back to Peter here. The investigations were started primarily for news and propaganda purposes. These people knew there wasn't really anything there. It was just a way of trying to undermine the Trump administration in the public eye. But now it's backflashing, and it is coming back to haunt them. And this is why it's a very, very nervous time, because when this article we were just talking about says that the Hillary political machine and Obama political machines will push back as hard as they can. They mean it in the most serious possible sense. And so I would not be surprised to see an actual assassination attempt on Trump right now.
No, nor would I, Mike. But I disagree with one thing about what you said. And let me just go on to add on the State Department under Kerry and them stonewalling on information. George Soros funding Antifa and the Black Lives Matter to undermine him with all those riots that took place after the election. Obama funding Soros's Antifa and Black Lives Matter through shaking down people from the Department of Justice. The Democratic Party itself, which Debbie Wasserman Schultz, of course the Clintons, and we have the participation, at least on some level, of MI6 in Britain, and who knows what about the rogue elements of the Russian people when they got that, whatever they got that stuff from in Russia. What we're talking about here is all the top levels in Obama, Clinton. This is Obama. This is clearly Obama. And, Jarrett and Rice and everybody, all these people, the Democratic Party, they all reported to Obama. Clapper, Brennan, Lynch, They all reported to Obama. Obama must have been in my opinion. I think that the difference in my theory to your theory is that it started. You're saying to undermine Trump's presidency. I'm thinking that it started because they were already long before the election interfering and surveilling Trump and undercutting people and undercutting Bernie Sanders. And they needed that Russian thing in order to cover up their tracks with the phony FISA warrants and all that stuff to make it look like they had a reason for undercutting him.
No, I agree with you.
That's yeah. But it comes back to Obama in my book. And what do you think, Mike?
Obama obviously was a player. He was the main focal point. You're right. He had to tacitly approve all of this from happening. But I still think a big part of it was being driven by Hillary Clinton herself from inside the State Department. And Obama probably just said, you know, I need to be sort of keeping an eye on this because I'm the boss after all. But it's looking more and more like John Brennan was the actual mastermind of what was going on. So, again, this is an unparalleled degree of corruption. It's the highest levels of the federal government. And we're already way, way past Watergate in terms of the scale of this operation.
Yeah, oh yeah, but Hillary left in 2011 or 12 from the State Department.
Yes,
and she had immense power with the deep state and controlling the Democratic Party. Although even there, Obama was still the titular head.
Yes,
but all these people who were direct reports to Obama on a daily basis, whose loyalty was to Obama, Rice, Jarrett, Lynch, Holder. All these Comey, all these guys were direct Clapper, direct reports to Obama, appointed by Obama for the most part. And I'm telling you, this is Obama. Obama I think he was so heavily invested in the corruption of the Clinton Foundation that he had this going on, and then that whole Russian thing was to cover the fact that he was trying to kill the whole election anyways.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I don't know that loyalty is necessarily a good word to use. I think that Clinton Foundation and the corruption thereof was the glue that held this team together. They're all dirty with the dirty money. And that's another reason why they're going to fight these investigations as hard as they can. Now, interestingly enough, there was a story that surfaced yesterday, and I've not been able to second source it yet. But for what it's worth, the story was that Susan Rice is already talking about an immunity deal with the Department of Justice, meaning she wants to tell what she knows without, sending herself to prison. Now, if that's true, this could be the first crack in the facade of all this corruption. But at some point, somebody's going to talk. Somebody's going to say, it's time for me to make a deal, this is what I know about what was going on.
It's getting close to actual charges being made, and now people are scrambling. And I saw that was the Rice thing. That was on your website yesterday. Yes. And I hope to God that's true. I think it probably is. But the only person she could rat out would be Hillary and Obama. She'd go to Hillary. She'd rat her out first. But, of course, Hillary would rat out Obama in a New York minute to save her own butt. But,
yes. Absolutely. No question about it. All right, Peter, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to switch over to Rick in Fort Lauderdale. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, all the best. Hey, Mike, all the best. A different lifetime ago, a couple of decades ago, I was a personal protection bodyguard for a Fortune 500 CEO in Florida. And I've always been in public service. And I'm going to tell you a little something about John O'Brien. He is a really, really bad guy. And I'm going to give you an actual... full disclosure, if you will. He's the guy that does all the wet work for the CIA. That's the puppet master. Okay, Obama. You think Obama's the boss? No, he's the boss of Obama. His connections are the Saudi royal family, and he is the gatekeeper for all the money. So that guy is the worst of the worst bad guys. He's had a lot of people killed, and I'm sure he would kill me if he had a chance for even saying it. He's a real bad guy, and I'm calling you because I'm definitely afraid about Trump's welfare, because that's how bad of a guy he is.
Yeah, I'm concerned about Trump's welfare right now because that deep state, whatever you want to call it, that rotted core of corruption, they're now feeling very, very threatened. And again, there's nothing they will not do to maintain their wealth and position. And I mean nothing.
I can't tell you that Breitbart was taken out by him, because that would sound like speculation. But I will say, anybody who goes on a rampage about talking about this guy, please wipe down your door handles before you touch him, because nicotine gets pure nicotine gets absorbed into the skin real quick.
Yes. Anything else, Rick?
Mike, I love you, and I love you, and thank you for what you're doing. You are the quintessential difference in today's world that we're living in, and I appreciate you every day.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words here, and thank you for the phone call. We're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to go to Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Well, let's go with that Aloha snack bar.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to say, Trump called for an IG inspector general. Let's get involved in this and stuff. And I was watching Newsmax earlier, and I saw Larry Klayman on there, and he said, "Oh, no, not an IG report. He could run this out after the midterms, and by the time Trump's impeached, he was calling for a special counsel." And he even offered his services, or that of Judge Napolitano, to do the special counsel on this. My question is what we keep seeing the deep state getting drained a little here and there, and then we see them put the plug back in the drain and refill it with some other knuckleheads. Are we ever going to get to the bottom of this with an IG or special counsel? Are we going to get to the end of this, or are we just waiting for the fall of the republic?
I think we're not going to really understand what's been going on until the government has collapsed, because over in Russia, they didn't really understand all that the Soviet government, the Politburo, and the Kremlin had been doing until after they had fallen and the Russian republics came into existence. And only then were they able to go into the archives and look at stuff and say, oh, wow, look at all this stuff the government was doing.
Well, it just seems very hard to even swallow the fact that we, the American people, we're stranded. We're stranded here, waiting for something to happen, and it's all internal. We need somebody from outside to come in. I mean, we need inspectors from all around the country. And let's put another 535 people together that have nothing to do with Congress, aren't getting paid, and let's have a conversation about what the hell is going on in our country, and let's come to some conclusion. I mean, these special counsels, look what it's doing. It's just wasting money. And an IG report, apparently from several different people I've heard this, that an IG report could carry on forever, and by the time they figure out what's going on, Trump could be impeached.
And certainly we know the Democrats want to drag out all of this stuff until the November elections to use against the GOP in general, because right now their fundraising is not going well. Their poll number, the polls are shifting against them for the midterms. And they're desperate to take control of Congress so they can raise taxes and impeach Donald Trump. I mean, politics is a dirty business. But the American people are now getting a college-level education on just how dirty federal politics, well, any politics, really can be. And they're waking up and realizing this country is not run the way we were taught it was supposed to run back in those state-controlled schools.
Well, if we keep going after the same people that put us in this problem to get us out of the problem, which what seems to be happening, I mean, with the Bolton appointee, the Hastell CIA I love to torture people, but I'm not going to tell you in front of Congress. I mean, when we start doing this, we keep going back to the deep state to fill the holes of the deep state. So, I mean, as long as we got this going on, I mean, it's always the same people. Notice that. I mean, it's always the same people in Congress, always. We're not getting past anything here. All we're doing is just taking one step forward and 6 steps backwards. It's crazy. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And frankly, I'm upset.
Well, some of those old hands in Congress, like John McCain and Nancy Pelosi, you have to look at the issue of just how crooked our elections are and realize that a lot of people sitting in Congress weren't actually put there by the voters. I mean, look how open and brazen they were about rigging the primaries in 2016. Nancy Pelosi came on out and said she saw absolutely nothing wrong with the Democratic National Committee rigging the primaries in favor of Hillary. I mean, that basically obviates having a primary at all. And that's how open this is now becoming. When John McCain won his last re-election, I got a lot of emails from people in Arizona saying, I don't understand this. I don't know anybody who voted for McCain. We definitely need our election system rigged and fixed. And one of the things Trump promised to do when he came into office, he was going to have his Election Integrity Commission. That's been disbanded. And the integrity of our elections is now being looked at by the Department of Homeland Security, which is like putting a drug addict in charge of your local pharmacy. Well, go ahead.
Well, when you look at these elections, I mean, for example, Hillary Clinton really messed herself up. I don't know if you recall the image. She said, if I'm elected, I'm going to attack Iran. I think that was a slap in the face to America because we're war worthy. But then you look at Nancy Pelosi. She just came out and said, well, when we take over Congress, we're going to raise taxes. You're saying all the wrong things, people. How do you expect to get reelected and then have us believe you got reelected? Because who's going to vote for somebody who wants to raise your taxes or kill Iranians?
Yeah, the people who are going to be getting, that tax money through entitlements because they figure the taxes are going to be raised on somebody else to give them more money. Basically, we've descended into ancient Rome here. It's bread and circuses.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. Oh, okay. Hey, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. Thanks for letting me on.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. And let me get this out here real quick. Trying to do too many things at the same time. Okay, we've got another caller, Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, 2 things. Number one, Hawaii, where you're at, and California was the second one, and there was some other ones that 49% of the populace cannot afford to pay their bills.
Yes,
that was one thing, but the other thing is, I almost fell over. I was listening. I didn't look into this yet, but I heard. That's all I did was that a state was proposing Medicare for undocumented workers at the tune of billions of dollars, and for undocumented people. I mean, that's what I heard, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. I mean, don't Americans need Medicare? I'm sorry, Medicaid. I get those two screwed up. Medicaid for themselves. I mean, but I was just wondering if you heard that come across the news line, something to that nature, in the billions of dollars.
Yeah, the Democrats have proposed that repeatedly in the past, that they want to provide Medicaid to illegal immigrants, along with a bunch of other stuff, and it's just a way of pandering to the illegal immigrants to get them to go on out and vote for Democrats in the November election, even though illegal immigrants are not supposed to be allowed to vote, which is one of the biggest failings of our electoral system, is the rejection of the voter ID requirement. Now, some states are starting to put it back in, but they're being fought tooth and nail by the liberals, who understand they will not be able to win in November. In fact, they're going to take a drubbing unless they can court that illegal immigrant vote. So they're literally willing to break the law and cheat to basically hang on to power. The entire federal government basically is operating with a criminal mindset.
Yeah, and I'll get back to you on what I heard. You know, I didn't, like I said, I didn't look into it, but whatever state that was, you know, and then the opposition would say yes, that would encourage illegals, undocumented, to come from other states into that state. That would encourage them to flood into that state to get freebies, free
Yes.
stuff, right? You know, so what about the taxpayers who are gonna get flooded out and who have to pay for all of this? It just I don't know. I don't know what country I'm in sometimes. Anyway, but that's all I had to say.
Okay, well, Mike, I think we need to look at California as an indicator of what's going to be happening. The illegal immigrants are pouring in there. They're a huge strain on the state's economy, and conditions have gotten so bad there, prices so high, taxes so high, that the American citizens who live there are starting to move out. They're heading for more rural areas. With lower tax burden, lower regulatory issues. And so California is going to become this state loaded with illegal immigrants and no money to give them the freebies. What do you think the illegal immigrants are going to do at that point? Turn to crime. So it's headed downhill. Anyway, Mike, we got to let you go. Got to do a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a while because I got a bunch of news to get through here. So let's go to Sovereign Man. Aloha, Sob. What's on your mind today?
Aloha. First of all, I want to ask you if I can plug the Chat Tango chat.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
I was wondering if I could plug the Chat Tango chat.
No, because I don't use it anymore.
Okay.
It was just getting loaded up with all kinds of people who were being offensive and rude and just trying to trash the place. So I just disconnected from it, and I still have the members only chat at the web page. But I've already got so much to do here during the show. I couldn't keep a focus on Chatango, and it just was more trouble than it was worth.
Sure. Well, I put a link in there for that. A picture of that new tattoo. It's actually a swastika. You know, the swastika is like 4 L's.
Yes, I know what a swastika is.
Yeah, well, it's the LOL swastika. Plus, I put the link to the Mooney article for the gold standard, going back to the gold standard. But anyway,
okay.
I mean. If you're concerned about it being spammed up, I mean, if you want, you could be a moderator. You can make anybody a moderator. You just message me.
Okay,
right.
I just don't want to use it right now, and that's why I disconnected it from my site. Because the few times I looked in there, there was a lot of name calling going on. It didn't seem like it was a productive, healthy environment. So I just don't want to have that anymore.
That's fine.
Okay.
Blessings, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines here for a little bit because I got a bunch of news. We may open them up when we get into the third hour. But getting on back to the domestic politics here, this upcoming report from the Justice Department's internal watchdog is going to basically criticize the FBI for the Clinton probe delay. Now, Hillary is out there screaming that James Comey destroyed her chances for the White House by reopening the email probe so close to the election. But it turns out that the FBI knew about the emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop in September of 2016, but waited until October to get the warrant to look at them. Now, maybe this was Comey's way of doing a gotcha or struggling against the leash, but he is going to be called on the carpet for that he didn't move expeditiously enough. And maybe he was just thinking more in terms of, I don't want to look at the emails because of what we might find, but then pressure was building. Why aren't you getting them? And it just worked out to be a bad circumstance. Now, at this point, Hillary has blamed everything in the universe for her loss of the White House. She's blamed men, she's blamed the FBI, she's blamed the corporate media, she's blamed the independent media, she blamed Republican wives for just mindlessly following their Republican husbands, she blamed white people. It just goes on and on and on. And unfortunately, sadly, Hillary Clinton is back in the limelight again. She's out there making the rounds. And I seriously think she's going to try and step back in 2020. I don't think she's done yet. But she's out there talking about, you know, the upcoming midterm elections and how we are going to take back the country we love. And she was speaking at a Democrat Women's Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C., and she urged party leaders to return to the basics and lay out the party's values for voters. And those values are going to be fair wages, the promise of universal health care, public school funding, gun safety reform, meaning the gun grab, and equal pay. And that's going to be the Democrats' platform going into November. Not that anybody is going to believe that once elected, they'll do anything about any of those issues, except, of course, for gun safety. Apparently, there is now a bipartisan move in Congress to enact a situation or a bill called risk protection, where anybody that knows you, family or friends, and knows you have firearms, they can file a report saying, I think this person is a potential mass shooter. They don't have to justify it. They don't have to explain it. And the police will come and get your guns. So they're going to now start deciding who poses a significant danger to someone, including yourself. Now, the only thing I'm dangerous with, of course, is a keyboard and a microphone. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton is refusing to endorse Cynthia Nixon's run for New York governor and is telling her supporters to vote for Andrew Cuomo. And what's interesting is this article concludes by saying the Clintons, who were once the ultimate Democratic political power couple, appear to have become victims of their own actions and ambitions. Couldn't happen to a more deserving couple as far as I'm concerned, but I still want to see the Clintons behind bars for all that they've done, not just to me and Claire, but to the country and the American people. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently Hillary Clinton is going to receive this prestigious medal from Harvard University. And it's called the Radcliffe Medal, which the university says honors individuals whose life and work have had a transformative impact on society, very carefully avoiding whether that transformation was good or bad. Bernie Sanders is back in the news. He's announced he's going to run for re-election to the Senate this year, and I certainly hope he wins. And the Democrats owe him for what they did to him in 2016. Of course, they have no shame or guilt or remorse. Yes, I would like to see him win his office. I would like to see that a great deal. Now, things are heating up out in California, and the Anti-Defamation League is denouncing robocalls being made to California voters, exposing U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein, who is allegedly holding dual U.S.-Israeli citizenship, and the total domination that the pro-Israel lobby has over her, the state, and the country. Now, the robocalls are apparently produced by a group called the Road to Power and are part of a broader effort to support the Senate candidacy of former U.S. Marine Patrick Little, who is currently running against Feinstein in the upcoming election. And I hope he wins. I absolutely hope he wins. And the ADL is out there screaming, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you're a Jew hater, you blah, 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 what the ADL is always going on about. Talking about the economic news here, Europe and the U.S. are still going back and forth on the subject of Iran and the sanctions, with Europe basically saying, we're not going to go along. We're going to protect European Union countries who are targeted by either the Iran sanctions or secondary sanctions. They're even talking about retaliatory sanctions. But a lot of experts are saying that because of the close ties economically between the United States and the European Union, that ultimately Europe is going to be forced to back down on this. In other words, the U.S. has a bigger stick to hold the European Union hostage over the Iran sanctions. Now, I imagine that probably the political class in the European Union, now that they've made their point in the media, will indeed back down. Whether or not ordinary Europeans are going to go along with that remains to be seen. They may simply decide to boycott American products. And that's perfectly legal and legitimate for them to do. Now, you've probably heard in the news a lot of talk going all the way back to that ill-conceived oil price war with Russia, that Russia has become economically isolated. In my view, the reverse is true. It is the United States that is economically isolating itself from the rest of the world with all these talks of trade wars and sanctions. But apparently over at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, foreign investors basically came on in ready to do business with Russia with funds worth over 13 trillion with a T dollars. So that puts an end to the lie that Russia is economically isolated. They're open for business, and business appears to be good. Meanwhile, up in Canada, their deficit has reached crippling levels. The government is losing billions of dollars. Well, at least it's better than here in the U.S., where our government is losing trillions of dollars. Where did it go? I don't know. It was here a minute ago. You know, just one of those things. It's probably in the back of a drawer somewhere. But a trillion here and a trillion there, and soon you're talking some real money. Over in Chicago, McDonald's has built a new corporate headquarters, and they just basically opened up. And McDonald's workers are now protesting around the new McDonald's headquarters, demanding $15 an hour wages. So that's not going to look too good in the media. I mean, the wealth inequality in this country has reached crisis levels. And you would think that a functioning, reasonable government would understand, or even corporate leadership would understand. Before you can get money away from workers, you have to create an environment in which they can get it. The lower wages and salaries go, the less taxes these people pay. The lower wages and salaries go, the less things they're going to buy. Our economy is in a death spiral right now. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's the reality of what's going on. Now, companies in emerging markets are more leveraged than they were before the last big meltdown. We're talking 2008. The indicators are not good. The indicators are Wall Street did not learn a lesson from 2008. They've gone back to playing the same games, demanding deregulation so that they can just have all the fun that they want, and they're building up to yet another crisis. Looking at the retail reality, the total amount of retail space that is now sitting empty and idle in the United States is 77 million square feet. That's a lot of square footage that is sitting there empty. And finally, when you have 43% of Americans who can't pay for food and rent, you have to ask, is this an economic crisis? And my answer would be yes. The American people are suffering. The illegal immigrants are getting goodies, the refugees are getting goodies, the military is getting lots of goodies, Israel's getting goodies, Wall Street gets goodies. Ordinary American people are being abandoned. Now, the Trump administration has announced that it wants to roll back laws governing teenage labor. And I don't agree with this. There is currently a bill, Americans Hazardous Occupation Orders, and it prohibits employers from tasking teenagers under the age of 18 with the operation of heavy equipment like chainsaws, working at high altitudes, working on rooftops, and a broad variety of other, inevitably hazardous types of manual labor for more than 1 supervised hour per day. But the Department of Labor is going to introduce a proposal that would remove those restrictions to literally, they're claiming it's to safely launch more family-sustaining careers by removing current regulatory restrictions on the amount of time that apprentices and student learners may perform hazardous work. Getting on over to Europe, Italy's new government, the coalition between the Five Star Movement and Lega, they're already out there shaking things up. They want to lift all the Russia sanctions. They want to basically reduce Brussels' control over their country. And they're saying it's time for a rediscussion over this intense control coming out of Brussels. Some of it is very trivial and picky, almost like Brussels does it just to prove they're in charge. But the new government of Italy says it's time for Brussels to pull back and allow Italy to be self-governing. And they also want to deport 500,000 migrants. They want to take their country back. Over in Germany, the Alternative for Germany party is suing Angela Merkel over the migrant crisis. And they're saying that basically Angela Merkel did not really have legal authority to open Germany's borders to refugees back in 2015. Members of AfD said the German government is bound by law and order. This is completely clear. This is the division of power. And the chancellor can't act like a dictator, although clearly that she has. Meanwhile, 82% of Germans surveyed in a poll believe the United States is now an unreliable partner when it comes to political cooperation. And this comes after Merkel herself said that Europe can no longer rely on Washington. Well, the hard truth is nobody can rely on Washington anymore. They certainly can't rely on their word about anything. And I'm sure that the thinking when this whole war operation began, all the way back with the Project for the New American Century, the thinking was this is going to be over in 2008, and we're going to do some things now that are probably going to look really, really bad to the American people and the rest of the world. But after the wars are all over and we divvy up the spoils, everybody will forget about it. Well, we're now 10 years past the original expected end of all of this war making, and 18 years of lies, false flags, violation of treaties is catching up with the federal government. Nobody trusts them anymore. Nobody should trust them anymore. Down in South Africa, apparently the problem with the white farmers is it's building to a crisis point. And some of the attacks on the white farmers are becoming quite horrific. It's not just shooting and killing them. It's things like burying them alive, beatings, machete attacks. And South Africa is very quickly turning into the new Zimbabwe. And it's gotten so bad that a lot of white farmers are abandoning their farms and they're flocking to Australia and seeking asylum there. So it's like the whole world has gone crazy here. I mentioned this in a phone call at the top of the show, but it's worth repeating. Investigators are now admitting that some of the victims in that Texas shooting may have been killed by police fire. And the Police told CNN officers arrived quickly and engaged the shooter in the school's art lab section just 4 minutes from the time of the first shot. Now, definitely points for getting there quickly. But apparently the police were just shooting wildly, and the police on CNN said it's unclear whether all the victims were shot by the suspect or whether some were shot by deputies during the crossfire. So maybe we ought to send the police to that front sight training academy so they learn how to pick their targets out before they pull that trigger. Over in Virginia, the General District Court found a Nebraska professor guilty of vandalizing the home of NRA chief lobbyist Chris Cox, who lives in Alexandria, Virginia. Now, this professor, Patricia Wanch Hill, she pleaded not guilty and to the charge of misdemeanor destruction of property. She has to pay a $1,000 fine and was ordered to stay 500 feet away from the Cox's residence. And apparently what she did in January of this year is she sprayed fake blood on Cox's home. And there was surveillance video that caught her doing it. And apparently this is not the first time that she's done it. So what's really interesting is you see the gun grabbers screaming violence, 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 violence. They're the ones willing to resort to violence to get their way. Admittedly, vandalizing a home with paint is a very low-key violence, but it still shows a streak of uncivilized behavior and an unwillingness to discuss the issue of gun control. They just want what they want when they want it. Up in Oregon, there was this teenager who started a major wildfire along the Columbia River Gorge, which when Claire and I drove through there, it's absolutely beautiful. He has been ordered to pay restitution. I don't think he's ever going to pay it off because they hit him with a bill for $37 million. And certainly that's going to set an example and hopefully will be a deterrent to other people who think starting fires is cool. Now, I have to applaud Project Veritas because over the last week, they've released several videos involving teachers' unions and educators all across America, basically revealing that there is a pattern of cover-up and protection when teachers are physically, verbally, or even sexually abusing children. And they got one in Ohio, pardon me, they literally got one of these teachers union executive saying that, you know, stuff happens, you know, these things happen, and, you know, if we investigate, we'd have to report it, and we really don't want to do that. And of course, usually along with the blame the victim excuses, you know, these are bad kids, or in the case of sexual abuse, the child came on to the teacher. Well, even if the child comes on to the teacher, okay, the teacher is not supposed to go along with that. That doesn't excuse the behavior of the teacher. The teacher is supposed to know better. Getting on back down to Australia, specifically Victoria, the local city council has announced plans to audit children's books and toys with a plan to ban them from all kindergarten schools and libraries if they don't meet strict gender guidelines. And the ban includes a ban on the use of boy or girl in the books. And the parents are saying, this is utterly ridiculous. And it really is. It is completely and utterly ridiculous. Its PC has just become a caricature of itself. And the more they push to try and control gender issues or whatever they're talking about today, the more absurd they look. And I think because the political correctness movement is associated with the Democratic Party, that this is going to work against them in November. It may be a major reason why their poll numbers are slumping. We got to take a break for commercials. We're going to go ahead and reopen the phone lines, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I have to disagree with Peter from Los Angeles. I agree with him 99.999% of the time, but Obama's just like a one puzzle piece in like a giant jigsaw puzzle. So
you're right.
He's only, like he's only small. He's small potatoes in terms of what's going on. Because if you look at what's going on in Europe, they're all on the same page when it comes to either migrants or refugees or illegal immigrants over here, and the wars. So, and the sanctions up until a point, until now, it's hurting Europe. But they were all on the same page. So this is part of the neoliberal empire. That's what it is. Like you said, Australia with the diversity thing, with the books.
Yeah.
This is all part of the same. If you look over here in California, it's the same thing. I mean, you can't blame just Obama for this whole thing. This has been going on probably before Obama was
no
born.
Question about that. It's systemic. It's systemic. We have unfortunately seen a government evolve where the most ruthless and corrupt inevitably rise to the top.
And Mike, I want to talk about Hillary Clinton, like real quick, because I really don't want to talk about her too much. About her wearing that with the Russian hat. If you can't beat them, join them, and everybody's laughing. But do you realize there's people in the audience? The joke's on them because the money from the investigation was taken out of their pockets, basically. So
yeah.
The joke's on them.
Yes.
and we all know it was a lie and a fraud. So, I mean, this is how ignorant people are. The joke's on them, the audience.
Well, it falls on us and all of our listeners to de-ignorant them. And that's the whole point of the show and the website is that people have a resource where they can get a different perspective and come to their own conclusions about what's going on in this country.
And then I want to still talk about Russia. Did you talk about how they successfully launched 4 Bulava ICBMs from a sub?
No, I hadn't mentioned it. I did see that in passing, though. Yeah.
And then one more thing, if I can remember. It has to be to do with the sanctions, Mike. Like, Trump is inadvertently or on purpose basically creating the unipolar world right before our eyes. I mean, multipolar world.
Yeah, well, Trump wants to create a unipolar world, but he's failing miserably. And we're seeing, again, the rise of a multipolar world.
And with Total, they must have something really, Total must be really scared because the sanctions amount of fine can't offset the amount of money they would make from that oil, the natural gas reserves in Iran.
Well, Total may be concerned about outright war. Coming in and destroying very expensive infrastructure. Anyway, Dustin, got to let you go. Got to do a station identification break. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, not too long ago, the Boy Scouts, under pressure from the liberals, opened their ranks to girls, and they're simply called Scouts now. I don't know what the Girl Scouts are going to do. Nobody was putting pressure on them to allow boys in, although that may be coming down the road as well. And I mentioned that this was going to create a potential problem, having boys and girls together out on campouts out in the wild, where nature would take its course. And apparently the scouting organization has realized this is going to be an issue. And so now it's been declared by the Scouts organization, condoms will be made available to all participants at the Boy Scouts Global Gathering. So they're just accepting that this is going to create a situation where the boys and girls in the Scouts are going to be having sex. I wonder what the parents are thinking about that. Turning over to the world of computers, apparently Twitter suffered a brief outage across Europe and the United States earlier today. Apparently the outage reached Egypt and Washington, D.C., and was gone for about 20 minutes, and then it came on back. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Terry in Long Beach, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, when I was growing up, we had this paranoia about world communism, but the communists are coming. Domino theory in Southeast Asia. I went to Vietnam to fight against the communists, you know?
Yep.
And everybody recognized it. It's a big threat. But what they don't understand is the New World Order is it. That's world communism. And they don't use that word because it's got a bad name.
That's true.
And if people, you know, would look at it for what it is, it's world communism, maybe they'd be more concerned, you know, and take some more actions against this, what's going on. But in this case, it's from within. You know, those enemies, foreign and domestic, these are domestic enemies that are pushing through this world communism thing. So people got to put it in perspective. That's all I want to say.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I agree with you.
On that, after I hang up, but I'll take it over the air. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Yeah, the New World Order, as far as we can tell, is going to be socialistic. But again, it doesn't matter what system you are under, whether it's socialism or capitalism. It all comes down to the people in charge. Are they good people or not? And the curse of all politics is it attracts the very sort of people who should not be allowed to have that kind of power. And that's the reason the Founding Fathers set up our country the way they did, so that there was no single person in control. Government was divided into three branches whose job it was to work with each other to run the nation for the benefit of the American people and to also keep an eye on each other. We have, unfortunately, long ago had stolen from us that beautiful government crafted by Thomas Jefferson. Getting on back to the world of computers and computing, apparently Russian-made smartphones, which are based on the Sailfish operating system, will be available for purchase in 2019. This is coming from the president of the Russian communication services provider Rostelcom, Mikhail Osevsky, and he's announced it in TASS. Now, whether they're going to be available here or not remains to be seen. Certainly they'll say they're Russian, they're full of spyware. Well, so are the American phones. Yeah, but our spyware is good. Their spyware is bad. You want to be spied on by your government or the Russians? Don't want to be spied on at all. Facebook has now teamed up with the Atlantic Council as part of their process of filtering out so-called fake news. And they're saying they're doing it to protect democracy and elections worldwide. But in point of fact, the Atlantic Council is basically a front for NATO. And so now Facebook is going to be scrubbing everything on Facebook with an eye toward NATO's agenda. And NATO, very alarmingly, has gone away from being a mutual defense pact to an instrument of aggression. So Facebook is now basically taking on the role of NATO's propaganda wing. Now, Facebook also banned the Electronic Intifada's ad for the new documentary, Killing Gaza. The ad was originally approved, and it was up and running successfully. And then all of a sudden, it was banned with no explanation. And the ban lasted for 3 days, and as public pressure built, the ad was restored again without explanation. And this apparent act of censorship comes as Facebook is deepening its collaboration with Israel lobby groups and a pro-war Washington think tank to impose tighter controls on what people are allowed to see online, especially about Israel's violation of Palestinian rights. So Facebook is totally useless at this point. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. Verizon has announced it's testing DSL usage caps. It doesn't call them usage caps. It's got some other fluffy term for them. And the issue basically is with all caps, with all data caps. You hit your cap and you go over it, you are hit with rather high overuse fees. And it also makes using streaming video more expensive and cumbersome. Now, money is probably the motive, but Verizon is out there saying, well, the cap exists so consumers can better understand their consumption habits. Now, the reality is that these caps do not, in fact, help manage the load on the net. Most people don't hit their caps. I don't think in the years I've had this iPhone account I've ever hit my data cap, because I do most everything over Wi-Fi. But it's just another way of trying to get a few more pennies from the pockets of the captive customers, because you're in that 2-year contract. Over in India, their Supreme Court ruled yesterday to basically say that Monsanto cannot patent seeds. The law in India is that things that are produced by nature, even if modified, are unpatentable. And this was a huge lawsuit. It just went through the courts, began in the Delhi High Court ruling that the seed giant cannot claim patents for Bollgard and Bollgard 2, its genetically modified cotton seeds in that country. And apparently in response to this lawsuit, this loss at the Supreme Court, Monsanto's Chief Technology Officer, Robert Fraley, basically came on out and lamented the news. Apparently he's also stepping down along with some other top executives. Now, whether that's related to the lawsuit or the coming merger with Bayer, I don't know. But a lot of people are very upset about that merger because Monsanto and Bayer are seen as two of the, well, you can use the word evil companies, but I would prefer perhaps socially irresponsible. They put out a lot of harmful products. They work very hard to keep them in the marketplace. We all know the problems with glyphosate and GMO. Bayer, if you remember, had a huge scandal where it was discovered this medicine they were making for hemophiliacs was contaminated with the AIDS virus. But instead of destroying the contaminated medication, it was sent to other countries where there were no laws prohibiting AIDS-tainted products, and it was sold to hemophiliacs who came down with AIDS and now have to buy AIDS treatment medications as well. Over in Fukushima, and by the way, if you haven't done so, you really ought to fire up Google Earth and take a look at the Fukushima power plant and use that little time slider. And you will see that over the course of the last several years, the ground around the ruined power station has just been filled up with all these containers of water. And now the grounds are completely full. Fukushima has been dumping water into the ocean. Farmers have been complaining, rather fishermen have been complaining. And now TEPCO is saying that the Fukushima water storage tanks are basically at capacity. They can't put any more in there. They have to just start dumping more of the radioactive water into the ocean. It's one of the reasons Claire and I have given up eating any seafood. Because if a fish becomes contaminated off the coast of Japan, they're still just as contaminated when they're caught off the coast of Hawaii. This is a huge, huge mess. And I'm sure all the cancer treatment clinics and hospitals are out there saying, yes, business is going to be brisk out there on the Pacific coast here. Over in the world of vaccines, apparently the cholera vaccine is turning out to be less effective than originally claimed. Another questionable product there. And here's a very interesting story. We've been talking about Gardasil and how it harmed a lot of people. In fact, it's one of the most harmful vaccines out there. Over in Europe, a lot of cases of narcolepsy young girls getting the vaccine and then they're unable to stay awake anymore for any long periods of time. And it turns out that, according to this article from 12160, Gardasil triggers the immune system to attack the patient's brain. And this is a peer-reviewed Science Journal article is the source of this. But Gardasil, definitely without question, attacks the brain. The end result is depression, or this may be the mechanism that led to the narcolepsy. And now that they're talking about giving this to boys, again, it's just a racket. They've taken medical care, they've turned it into a racket. So over at John Rappaport's website, he's out there saying that, first of all, autism is not a single disease. It's a collection of behaviors and symptoms clustered together by committees of psychiatrists. And what is being called autism is simply damage to the brain, neurological damage, which means the causes could be coming from a variety of places, like Gardasil. And vaccines can and do cause damage. And parents of damaged children know this. They were there. They saw their children before vaccination and after vaccination. Now, there's been yet another study showing that the aluminum vaccine adjuvants are definitely linked to autistic behavior. They did this as a mice study, and they took mice and they gave some of them vaccines with the aluminum adjuvants, and the others just got plain saline, the control group. And they were able to detect autistic behavior in the vaccinated mice. So those adjuvants are a big part of the problem. When I was a kid, nobody ever heard of allergies to peanuts, peanut anaphylaxia. It was so rare. It was not part of the universe. Today it's everywhere. And if you go to the supermarket and you'll pick up a package, and it may in fact include a warning saying this product was assembled on machinery that may have come into contact with peanuts, because peanut anaphylaxis is everywhere now, like autism. And the reason for that appears to be that peanut oil is used as another vaccine adjuvant. Well, peanut oil is something you're supposed to eat and digest, not just shove right into your veins. And in the process of forming antibodies to the pathogen in the vaccine, your body is also tricked into seeing anything peanut as a threat. And that's where this peanut anaphylaxis is coming from. We're going to take a phone call here from Roxanne in Texas. Aloha, Roxanne. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Hi, I hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. I just was thinking to myself, I must live in a different alternate reality, because Trump is getting quite a bit done. And I'll give you just two real quick examples. There was the Singapore company called Broadcom that was working on a hostile takeover of Qualcomm, because they wanted to buy them out for like $117 billion. And so Trump got the CFIUS, that's the Committee on Foreign Investments, which is it's a department of the Department of Treasury. So they had to do a regulatory review. And then Trump stepped in and wrote an executive order blocking the takeover, which is the 5G, our nefarious 5G. So that's a good thing to me. Everybody's screaming 5G. Well, Trump just blocked it. So to me, that's a real good thing. Now, the Farm Bill. Stop the subsidies. Farmers can grow what they want, sell raw milk, pushing back Monsanto and GMO. So I think that's another good thing. I mean, really? And they can sell it on the sides of the roads and all of this. So I don't know. I see so much, and I have a long list, but I'll let you get back to your show. But then they're taking the tariffs out of China, because 50% of what we get is tariffed by China. That's the Clintons sold us out on that deal, because they were on the board of Walton's back when.
Walmart,
anyway,
yes.
Have a good show. See you time.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Trump has done some things. He's working on his border wall. But Trump campaigned on issues that affect all of us, because obviously I'm not an illegal immigrant. I don't live near the border. I don't work for the 5G industry, and I'm not a farmer any longer. So these things, positive though they may be, don't really affect me. But Trump campaigned on issues that affect all of us: ending the wars, draining the swamp, putting Hillary Clinton in prison. And he has definitely not achieved any of those. He wanted a review of vaccines. We haven't actually heard anything from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In a long time. Now, maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is doing good work and the media is simply refusing to cover it. But Trump appears to have dropped the ball also on the issue of honest elections. He's made a lot of mistakes here. He's made a lot of mistakes here, starting with coming into the Oval Office and letting the Obama holdovers stay there. Because instead of draining the swamp, he started hiring in the alligators and water moccasins to top staff positions. So I'm very disappointed in him. You know, and I did support him in 2016, or to be more accurate, I opposed Hillary Clinton. But as of right now, unless there's a dramatic shift in policy from the White House, I won't support him in 2020 unless Hillary steps back in again. Other than that, I'm looking for a new candidate. Tulsi Gabbard. I want to see Tulsi Gabbard get the nomination. Getting on back to medical care, there's been another mice study that implicates the hepatitis B vaccine in causing neurological damage. And this research apparently goes back all the way to 1998, but it's all starting to come on up. And this should just basically get everybody concerned about the neurotoxicity of these vaccines and their adjuvants. I mean, they're literally pumping aluminum into your bloodstream. And there was at one point a serious theory that aluminum, exposure to aluminum, led to Parkinson's syndrome, or just plain senility, age-related mental deterioration. But again, healthcare is not about healthcare. It's been turned into yet another racket. We're a nation of rackets, from sea to shining sea, from sea to polluted sea. Over at Psychology Today, we have to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And Aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And there's an article out of Psychology Today. Consider the source of this one. Basically admitting there is no such thing as ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, the guy who came up with that term shortly before he passed away went public and said it's a made-up illness to sell medications with. But the point of this article is they're saying that kids come in all types. They're in all shapes and sizes. Some kids are active, some are quiet, some are dreamers, others are daring, some are dramatic, some impulsive, some are natural leaders, others followers, some are athletic. And that there's been this trend by the psychiatric industry to basically define a theoretical normal child, and to declare that anybody who doesn't fit that model is suffering from some kind of a mental illness in order to sell more medications. And right now, with this out-of-control defining of virtually every natural behavior as a mental illness, it's estimated that 25% of Americans are now considered mentally ill by the psychiatric industry. And things like wanting to eat safe, natural, healthy food, that's been defined as a mental illness called orthorexia nervosa. That's how absurd it's become. And they use it to push these medications, and the medications themselves are dangerous and have side effects. Now, there's been a new study looking at the relationship between prescribing of ADHD medications and calls to poison control centers from kids apparently taking too much of the stuff because it makes them feel good, at least for a while. And they're saying that there needs to be a better control. I have a better idea. Stop giving the kids these drugs in the first place. Article out of Dr. Circus, and it's another confirmation of what Oliver North said just yesterday. Mass shootings are caused by these drugs. 27 drug regulatory agency warnings cite psychiatric drug side effects of mania, psychosis, violence, and homicidal ideation. They've got 1,531 cases of psychiatric drug-induced homicide and homicidal ideation have been reported to the United States Federal Drug Agency. 65 high-profile cases of mass shootings and murders have been committed by individuals under the influence of these drugs. And this article goes on to say there's never been a federal investigation into the link between these seemingly senseless acts of violence and the use of mind-altering psychotropic drugs. Well, the fact of the matter is that Congress actually did bring this up briefly and ended the session without doing anything about it because, again, those pharmaceutical companies have got lots and lots of money, lots and lots of lobbyists, and Congress is all about protecting the almighty dollar. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me okay? Because you're breaking up on my phone.
I hear you just fine.
Okay, so it's just my end then. So yeah, you were talking about vaccinations and that. I'm a living, walking testament to how bad these things are. I've phoned and said this before. When I was 3, my MMR shot that night. My mother was bathing me, and I went into convulsions. I almost died. Had I not been in the bathwater, I probably would have, had brain damage. The emergency room actually said that. At 11, fluoride treatment. I ended up in the hospital for 3 weeks. When I was 32, I went for, what do they call, hay fever shots. And the second to last shot, the doctor hit a vein and injected it right into my bloodstream. Caused a lot of problems. So, my sister, she was on Champex, this smoking cessation drug. It's an SSRI.
Yep.
And, after being on it for 3 weeks, she wanted to kill herself. So this stuff is real. There are people that have actually suffered from this stuff. Not a joke,
Well,
I don't know why they consider it to be a joke.
The problem is human beings are different from one to the other. And just like that Psychology Today article was saying, we come in all shapes and sizes. And this one formula fits all approach to medicine really doesn't work. They come up with something that's going to work on the majority of people, and they put it out there in the market, and they just, they apologize for the damage it causes the others, or more than likely they basically lobby the corporate media to never report it because it's all about the money. But at this point, I find the entire medical industrial complex very untrustworthy. As I was telling that other individual who called in with that website about doctors, it is about the money. Anyway, listen, Al, stay on the line. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Al in Canada and vaccine damage, and he had a couple of personal stories to share with us. And yeah, I understand that Chantix can be really, really bad stuff. But again, they push it in TV commercials to people who don't really need it. When I quit smoking, I did it with just those patches, and I was fine, and I didn't need to take Chantix.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I went on the patch, and that was like 12 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't even change the dosage, the first week, second week, whatever. I just cut them. It was cheaper, and they lasted longer, right? The box lasted longer. So if anybody wants to quit smoking, that's how you do it. Week 1, whatever, might be too strong, cut it in half, and away you go, right? And cut it in 3, cut it in 4.
Yeah, it's definitely the best way to go. The problem with the nicotine gum is that when you get a craving, you take it, and you're just swapping one addiction for another. But definitely the patch is a good way to wean yourself off the nicotine addiction.
Yeah, it worked great. I mean, I had no problem. Vaping, there's talking about switching one from the other. I see this stuff all the time now. It's crazy. And, it's one guy said he sleeps with the thing that I met. It's unbelievable.
Okay,
Man,
what were we talking about?
Vaping. Those vaporizers.
Oh, the vaping, yeah. Well, you have to be careful about those. Apparently, there's a problem. Some of the models are using lithium batteries, and they're exploding, right in your face. Oh, my goodness. And, I know a lot of vapors think that it's preferable to smoking because you don't have all the other bad stuff that comes from tobacco. And it may well be, but it's still an addiction, and ultimately you're better off without it.
Yeah, these things exploding in your face, that's right out of the Flintstones, for crying out loud, or Merry Melodies.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yeah, instead of an exploding cigar, you've got an exploding vape.
Jesus. Well, I appreciate you taking my call, Mike. You have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Chris in Las Vegas. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, I'm going to continue the conversation on these injections and these suicidal psychotropic drugs that they're administering to people in the guise of care, as they call it. And I have some pretty deep acquired knowledge from studying the law related to these issues and cases I've been directly involved with. And notwithstanding the fact that the Supreme Court said in 2 or 3 different cases, in particular GE versus Merrill Dow Pharmaceutical Incorporated, that in order to be evidentiary value, any evidence must be quantifiable under Federal Rule of Evidence 702 for qualification of an expert witness, mandating that to be considered evidentiary, it must be observable, measurable, and repeatable. The 3-pronged test called the Daubert, D-A-U-B-E-R-T, analysis for qualification of expert witnesses. Further, in a progeny or offspring case called Kumho Tire Company versus Carmichael, the Supreme Court back at that time had the audacity to profess that psychiatry, psychology, and mental health practices are particularly pseudoscience, noting that the psychiatrists and psychologists and mental health people have vested financial interest in the outcome of all their cases. Therefore, you can never find agreement by 1 or 2 of them on anything in particular, because everything in the DSM-4 and 5, Diagnostic Symptoms Manual for the so-called psychiatric trades, is all subjective, interpretive, and equivocatory words are used throughout. Therefore, they don't rise to the level of verifiable science or third-party, not conflicted, reviewed oversight. They usually have bide prostitutes professing the merits of their so-called drugs. And like you say, they do use what are called accommodation parties to ply the physicians with bribes, trips, or perhaps other party favors to acquire their promoting the drugs for selling for the manufacturer. Now, the other aspect that I think is very dangerous to this, one would have to look for Kenneth Goff, G-O-F-F, and his treatise on psychopolitical warfare. And Kenneth Goff was a best friend of Joseph Stalin and former head of the Soviet KGB, as I recall. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was Lavrentiy Beria that was a Soviet KGB head who wrote the pamphlet Brainwashing, which was based upon Kenneth Goff's psychopolitical warfare, which is using psychology, psychiatry, and mental health so-called practices to be able to annihilate your political enemies, have them committed to a so-called psychological institute or facility, locked up, much like they did some of FDR's opponents, like, let's see if I can recall the guy's name. I'm having a difficulty right now. I know that Eustace Mullins, Ezra Pound is who it was.
Yes.
He was locked up for 13 years by FDR in St. Elizabeth's Criminal Infirmary for the Criminally Insane Psychiatric Care Facility in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And so when we understand that all this psychology and psychology are all subjective interpretive, there's no true science that founds anything. It's not anything to stretch the imagination that ADHD is an invented disease to sell drugs.
That's exactly right. There is no science. That Supreme Court decision was absolutely right. Psychiatry and psychology are pseudosciences. It's a belief system. There is no machine that you can be hooked up to that's going to say you're depressive, you're manic depressive, you're any of these things. It's all subjective opinion by the practitioner. But again, it exists to serve itself, to sell a lot of drugs and make a lot of money. And there is a financial incentive to basically look at anybody and say, oh, you've got a mental illness.
One last note, Michael. The Supreme Court also in that same Kumho Tire Company, KUMHO versus Carmichael Incorporated, they further said, besides being mere pseudoscience, they also said it was, and I italicize, witch doctorage. So thank you very much. I think I'll let myself go and carry on with a great show, Michael.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Lisa in Pennsylvania. Lisa, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today?
Well, I want to begin by thanking you for covering subjects like these letter diseases, is what I call them, the fake diseases or what have you. It's really important. I don't hear that a lot on even alternative media. So thank you. And I wanted to tell you, I unschooled my son. He never went to public school. We didn't do school at home. It's just a different method. But in doing that, I read up on all kinds of books, and this, that, and the other. And because our schools are based on that Prussian model to get people ready for factory work,
yep.
A lot of these ADHD and QL, MXV, whatever the heck, are really just regular childhood ants in the pants that everybody has.
Yes.
And when they're forced to sit in a classroom and pay attention and look straight ahead and switch classes when a bell rings or raise your hand to go do a bodily function, a lot of that, I think, is involved with the particular model we have for public schools. Now, some schools aren't like that, clearly, but a lot of them are. Also, we were chastised, I guess, by our doctor because when my son was 10 months old, he's now 22, she wanted me to give him all these fluoride tablets. And I wasn't really up on it, but my ex-husband was very up on these things. And he said, there's absolutely no way. And we just threw them out.
Yes.
But I think a lot of these so-called diseases are childhood growing pains, just growing up, just being a kid.
Yeah, that's exactly it. When I was a school kid in New Hampshire, there was no such thing as ADHD. We called it my teacher is boring the heck out of me. And you're going to see it in every single classroom. There are going to be the smarter students, and there are going to be the dummies and the ones who don't want to work. And the more, when the teacher is having to spend time with the dummies and the ones who don't want to work, the smarter kids are just left to get bored. And they may reach a point where they act out a little bit. And that's a very natural, normal reaction to just being shoved in that classroom and ignored and neglected. But they wanted to call it a disease and drug the kids. And that Psychology Today article does make a valid point. It is unrealistic to arbitrarily, by committee, define an ideal child and then medicate everybody, every child, until they are just like that artificial construct, that ideal.
That's exactly right. And, I realize in this economic time that it's not easy for people to homeschool. But if you can possibly do it, and like I said, we went kind of over the edge, not over the edge, but we didn't do the school at home. I mean, he learned the basics, and then whatever he took an interest in, that's what he did. And he's getting along fine in the world right now.
Good.
But trying to keep them out of this, being labeled as this, that, and the other thing, it just drives me to drink. So that's all I wanted to say, and thanks again for covering this. The calls are very interesting. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're going to go to Milton, also in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Milton. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
On that vaping stuff, the ones that are exploding was what they call unregulated. And what happens is if you do your own coils, make your own coils, okay?
Yes.
And if you have a short in there, it's like crossing your battery. It's going to blow up. And that's what's happening. There's no safety in there. Like I've been vaping for 2 years, and I have a mod that's regulated. And if it should be a short in there, it will not fire.
Okay, well, I know absolutely nothing about how these vape devices work. So I'll just take your word for it. But yes, obviously shorting out a battery can lead to an explosion.
Yeah, well, there's a health issue too. It's not conclusive yet with the vaping that I found out. They say that the vape that you inhale into your lung is microscopically smaller than the particles in cigarette smoke.
Yes.
And that any damage that's done, okay, is going to be deeper into the lung tissue. But like I said, it hasn't been conclusive yet, but they're thinking that's what's going to happen with the vapors.
Well, yeah, I mean, I see a lot of them around here, and it's amazing how much vape they produce. I'll be sitting in traffic, and the car in front of me, the driver has got his little vaping device going. He puff out the window, and it's like, oh my God, the car's on fire. No, wait, he's just vaping.
You know, since I went to vaping, okay, like my oxygen level, okay, I don't know what it was prior, but it's up to 96. And the doctor said that's great, you know.
That is a good level. That is a good level.
So, you know, it has some benefits. I'm down to like 8 milligrams of nicotine. So if you really want to, it aids in it. But like I'm hooked on it now, like for 2 years now. So,
well, if you want to get off it, again, the patch system, and I don't know about Pennsylvania, here in Hawaii, they actually have a government program to help people quit smoking, and they'll send you free patches. Now, I just went down to Long's and I got my boxes of patches there, but there may be somebody around there that's going to give you the free patches.
Yeah, we just became a no-smoke building here. And they offered that program here for free.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I should take them up on that.
All right. Well, Milton, thank you very much for the phone call. And we're going to let you go here. And I'm going to get on back here. I got some news to share with you. U.S. birth rates have dropped to the lowest level since 1987. And a lot of the open borders people are out there saying, well, this is another reason we should let the illegal immigrants come on in because we've got to keep our population up, which is odd because these are the same liberals who are out there saying Planned Parenthood needs to be kept open and supported because population is a problem. So go figure on that one. Now, I'm sure that part of the reason birth rates are dropping for U.S. citizens is the economy. Having a child is very expensive. Especially with medical care being as sky high as it really is. But again, I have to express a concern about that epicyte gene. Because if you actually look at the decline in birth rates broken out by ethnicity, the birth rate decline is most pronounced among Hispanics, who are very high per capita consumers of corn and corn products. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the epicyte gene was a genetically modified corn where if you ate that corn, you would be unable to reproduce. It was originally funded by the USDA. It's now been acquired by Monsanto. And so you have to wonder if this is another one of these depopulation tools that they're always using, going on back to National Security Study 200. Okay, so let's catch up on the volcano. A lot of news going on about the volcano. And there is now a growing concern that the lava is getting dangerously close to the Puna geothermal plant. Now, the pentane that had been stored on the grounds has all been removed, but they're saying that obviously when the lava hits the wellheads, the wellheads have all been capped off and closed with heavy steel, but lava will melt steel, and there could be explosive gases inside those wells. So they are concerned there could be explosions if the power plant is engulfed. Now, I say that, but with the following caveat. There is no danger of an explosion large enough to cause a tsunami. The geothermal plant is well away from the ocean. And for some reason, there are people who like to go on out and just spread all kinds of wild stories. And there was somebody that was putting this out about 2 days ago saying that the Puna plant had already been engulfed in lava. There was an explosion coming. It was going to cause a tsunami that would swamp the entire Hawaiian island chain. No, definitely not. But they are concerned about potentially explosive gases still down in those well pipes. If those caps melt off. Now, with all that lava on top of it, how big an explosion it's going to be, we really don't know. But there are continuing ash explosions from the Kilauea crater itself. But again, there's another story here. This is from KITV saying that there are false tsunami rumors circulating around over our volcano, and that does not help the situation. To be going on out and spreading this kind of disinformation. Now, 2 of the flows of lava are now going into the ocean, and it's producing a new noxious air contaminant called LAYS. We had VOG first and then LAYS. The winds are still out of the northeast and pushing most of it off to the southwest, but because of circulation, whatever, we are starting to see this stuff here on Oahu. We can go on out, look across to the mountains. Very obviously, we see it's full of haze, and we can feel it stinging in our eyes. We recognize it from when we lived in Los Angeles, but that's the new issue. The Hawaii Tourism Authority is very concerned that all this negative press about the volcano is cutting into tourism, which does remain Hawaii's major industry. So we'll be right back after these few words with the last segment of our program. And aloha America, welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today here. We're following up on the volcanic eruption down on the Big Island. And people are now getting very concerned about the roads into that area. Highway 137 has already been cut off by lava crossing it to get into the ocean. Residents in that area can still get out through Highway 130, so they're not calling for a mandatory evacuation yet. But if Highway 130 gets cut off, anybody who has not yet evacuated is going to have to be airlifted out, and they've already airlifted 4 people from Puna out after their access, road access got cut on off. There's been 1 injury. I think I mentioned it yesterday. A gentleman was on his 3rd floor balcony and got hit with a lava splatter. And I know on the video it looks light and fluffy, it's red and glowing and pretty, and it's up in the air, but it's also very dense rock, and a splatter of lava can weigh as much as a refrigerator. And so it's a very, very serious situation. They're already talking about what they're going to do with the area after the eruption ends, because it's going to be years before this new lava flow is cool enough to do anything with. And they're already thinking about how they're going to reopen the area to traffic. And somebody came up with the idea of basically reopening Chain of Craters Road. Now, Chain of Craters Road, as the name implies, it's part of the Volcano National Park, and it was cut off by an earlier eruption. But engineers are now saying it may be a lot simpler to clear that lava, which is cooled, and you can deal with it, off of Chain of Craters Road, and then basically take it on in to connect with the existing roadways in these rift zones. So they may be looking at that. But again, a lot of eyes are on that geothermal power plant. A lot of people are very concerned about it. But again, there are people out there spreading false rumors. For whatever reason, they get a thrill or a kick about it, about a tsunami is going to wipe out the entire state. The only way that would happen is if the entire south flank of Kilauea fell into the ocean. And every once in a while, chunks do fall into the ocean. But for that entire south flank to go, it's a possibility, but remote at this point. So the biggest worry right now is, just basically sitting and watching. And a lot of people are very concerned because you don't know what's going to happen next. You really do not know what is going to happen next. And I'm glad that we don't live on the Big Island. And if I were the Hawaii Tourism Authority, I wouldn't worry about tourism because the other states, we're still here. We still have our tourist attractions. And you know, once this eruption is over, there's going to be a flood of people who want to go on down and see that, the way that Claire and I toured Kaanapali. Just to see, you know, nature's the boss, nature's in charge, and this is an example of it. So it really is quite a spectacle. Just, you have to be safe. It is an active volcanic system. So there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back. Oh, stay tuned for John Stadmiller, obviously. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. Stay off social media. It's completely compromised and filtered. Use email, or even better, face-to-face conversations. So we'll be back tomorrow, and aloha, America.